before we get into the actual project, let's talk a little bit about you, your background, how you got into photography, that kind of thing. So I remember a conversation a while ago where we were just chatting about kind of background history, and you said you were not from the States, and originally. And I remember when we started talking about this idea, there was this weird like parallel where I was like, man, this is kind of cool because we're talking about doing this project that has so many steps and like chapters, and it goes on and on and on, and you have this thing that you're just like, oh, you go on a little journey to come up with the finished product. And I was like, that's kind of you. That's actually really cool. So tell us a little bit about like where you came from, your background, how you grew up, all that kind of stuff, how you ended up in Portland, I guess. It's kind of a long, big question, but...
Oh, it's so long, and I get to tell the story too often. But I was born and raised in Japan. My parents were missionary academics, and they're from Oregon.
Okay.
So I came to the States when I was 18 in 2000. I was the youngest child, and it was kind of time for the missionary family to move back to the States. So I came back to Oregon, where my parents are from. They're not here though. Yeah.
But you spent pretty much your entire sort of growing up in Japan specifically?
15 years in Japan and about 7 years total of my life in India. Growing up and after growing up also.
And then you've been here since then, basically?
I've been here maybe 5 years total, off and on for the last 20 years.
Okay.
Yeah. I've always wanted to leave. I even want to leave right now.
So then what keeps you here? Like why are you still in Portland 20 years later?
Again, for the same exact reasons of the music and the culture and the identity of Portland always brings me back. I've roamed around all of the states and the world, but the identity of Portland, cultural identity of Portland always brings me back.
Huh. Interesting. And then you live here in St. John's?
I did up to a couple months ago.
Cool. But you've been around, you've been in the area. I feel like we've been kind of had like this sort of connection.
I used to just live close, a few blocks away, and I used to come every day.
Cool. No, totally. And that's awesome. I feel like it's always really special to sort of highlight our neighborhood or the people who've been around that we know, you know? There's just something special about having a relationship already. Then you just get like double excited when something cool happens. But cool. Well, speaking of what's happening here, tell us a little bit, like in a nutshell, how would you describe the idea? And well, I guess before we get there, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Photography.
Yeah.
How did photography enter into your life?
Yeah, you asked me that question, didn't you? Well, photography is a way to document all of my worldly wanderings, which is like kind of a lot. It's kind of grossly crazy how much I just wander around. So about 12 years ago, I realized that the best thing to do with that is photography, images, documenting, to go along with, all the other, writing and, things that can go with it. But images are really good for people in this day and age.
Sure. I almost feel like it's like visual journaling, where it's kind of like getting to capture moments or things about what's happening in life that sometimes it's hard to put the words to, but you're like, oh, I can just snap a picture of that, and that kind of preserves more of what my brain remembers of that thing than me trying to translate that, I guess, to writing, even though that can be its own kind of therapeutic thing to write it out. But I've definitely found photography as like this medium of kind of just like being able to capture something a little bit more easily in that moment. Do you feel like most of your photography happens as you travel, or now that you're here, you feel like you're more focused on where you're at?
For the first time I've gotten into photography that's like local, and it takes on a very different meaning and purpose. Before this chapter of Portland, it was all travel photography before this, and I started to be able to put together small short stories of photos from my travel photography and libraries, and that's when it all really started clicking, like, 10, 12 years ago.
Huh. Cool. Interesting.
So now it's a different chapter of this kind of stuff,
Sure.
which is not travel photography, but all the skills have come together.
Sure. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, cool. So speaking of this, I remember you coming up to me one time and being like, hey, I have this idea about doing like coffee photos, basically. And I was like, I have no idea what the heck you're talking about, but sounds awesome. And so we started chatting about it. How did this idea come to you? How did you find out about doing this?
I think I read about, when I started reading about 4x5 format, large format photography, and all the different things you could do, like for tinting. So I did read about coffee tinting these photos, but I made my own, formula and twist on it too. This is direct positive paper, so these are kind of like instant photos.
Okay.
What goes in the camera is this piece of paper.
Yep.
And it comes out and it's developed, and it's a positive, not a negative. So the contrast is quite different, and it takes some getting used to. It doesn't like bright, harsh light. It likes softer, longer exposure light. But the coffee tinting is made from coffee from this coffee shop.
Yeah, totally. So we started talking about it, and I was like, cool. Like, can we help out in any way? And you were like, well, I need coffee. And I was like, well, that's something we do. Definitely have lots of. And it's something we're always constantly thinking about. Like, how do we cut back on our waste or reuse the ingredients that we use, just to kind of give them as long of a life as we can. So when we were like, oh, let's start using some of our coffee grounds, we would make coffee. We would make drip coffee, mainly espresso, I think is what we were using. And we would collect the espresso grounds and save them for you after we had made coffees with them. So they were like used grounds. And you would come pick them up kind of on a rotation. And then every couple of weeks, you'd be like, hey, check it out. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. So you're using, kind of describe, how does the process work? Like if you were going to like layman's terms, for somebody who doesn't know a ton about film photography, what are you doing with the grounds, and how is it contributing to this?
Well, this is coffee tinting, so the development process is with traditional chemicals, and that was trial and error too. It's better to use traditional chemicals for the fine detail. Maybe someday I'll perfect there's so many chemical processes to get into. It's really cool.
So you're processing the photos and then using the coffee solution to basically tint them this like nice warm brown sepia almost.
I put in 2 huge Cambros of this coffee espresso grounds and turned it into sludge and really just boiled it down and squeezed it all out and used it for more than half of the photos. Yeah. Cool.
That's awesome. And then, I mean, you guys will see it when you come into the shop, but it's this really cool, like, kind of like almost sepia kind of filter almost on all the photos. And it just makes everything look like black and white, but more dramatic. That's kind of how I describe it.
Yeah.
Very cool. So we're selling them here in the shop. We have a limited number. How many do we have in total?
68 total.
Okay, 68 photos, and then we sell them, and then that's it. It's kind of limited release.
Yeah, everything's up on the walls. There's no extras.
Totally. And I mean, they're amazing. Every one of them is really unique. Every one of them is its own single. There's no copies or anything. It's like each photo is itself.
This is just moving the camera around, the park that all of us love.
Yeah, and this is all shot at Cathedral Park, of the bridge, up around the bridge. Those sorts of things. It's just right down the street for those of you who haven't been. It's amazing. Beautiful park.
And this is also spanning 2020, 2021.
Yeah, cool. So through this time, as we're all kind of like, what do we do with ourselves? Like, I'm in quarantine. What can I pick up to kind of take a project and be like, let's kind of do something along that timeline is really cool.
Yeah.
So awesome. Yeah, so we're going to have the photos up through the end of July, or I guess until we sell out, depending on when that is. They're $20 each. They're amazing. You can frame them up. You could use them for all sorts of things. They're really cool. We're super excited to have them. All of the proceeds are being donated. You want to talk a little bit about that before we wrap up?
Yeah, so everything is going to PPOP, which is Portland People's Outreach Project, which is a needle exchange and harm reduction group that operates in St. John's.
Okay.
They set up weekly, at least, near New Seasons in that cross park.
Yep.
And they hand out clean syringes, harm reduction supplies. I believe they still buy cans.
Okay.
And their presence is really important to those people. And all the proceeds do go to them because I believe in purposeful art.
Totally.
I think it really sends a message to all the people that come here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. So we're super excited. All of that money's going to them. We're just Venmoing them directly or throwing cash in the jar we're going to set up here. Yeah. Super excited. Thanks, Simon.